Meep.
The Idol is one of the most frustrating shows I've ever seen. It is the embodiment of every creative choice I cannot stand. And yet, because of the creative choices the show employs, it is damn near impossible to criticize, or at least it tries to be. I know that sounds confusing and contradictory, which, funny enough, are very good descriptors for the show itself, but it's actually a pretty simple 4-step Ryan Murphy approved formula that leads to the show's one and only desired result. I am going to attempt to break down this formula once and for all, but before I do that, I do have to give 2 huge warnings. 1, I will be spoiling the entire show, not that you should care. And 2, I need to give a content warning because we're going to be lightly addressing some heavy subject matter. Emphasis on lightly. Still, if you feel that engaging at all with any of the following topics puts you at risk of harm, please click away now. Speaking of potentially upsetting content, the cultural conversation surrounding this show, especially from those creatively involved, is often hyperfixated on its controversial content. Namely, its explicit and raunchy sex scenes, cringeworthy dialogue.
Stretch that tiny little butt.
We'll talk more about that later. And also the behind-the-scenes controversy as detailed by the tell-all Rolling Stone article. The reason this bothers me is not because the show's provocative depictions of sexual violence and abuse and the messy and often hypocritical creative process of the show are not both worth pointing out and criticizing. They definitely are, but rather that all this controversy gives the creative team behind this show an easy scapegoat they can use to deflect that criticism. It gives them the impression that the core issue people have with this show is that it is offensive, and that people just refuse to look past that. While I do agree that there are a sizable amount of pearl clutchers out there who are protesting The Idol and Sam Levinson's other work for holier-than-thou reasons, I still think pretending that's this show's root issue is a pretty cheap, manipulative, and immature move to try and make the show immune to critique. It just frustratingly keeps the discourse about the show at a surface-level standstill, evidenced by this entire section of the video focusing more on a singular aspect of the show, how the show got made, and what people are saying about it, rather than saying anything about the show itself. Now, me personally, I'm not offended by this show because of its controversial material. I'm also, in general, not a supporter of the idea that exploring taboo subjects in art is inherently equivalent to endorsing them. I simply believe that when you're exploring taboo subjects as an artist, you have a responsibility to do so thoughtfully, or at the very least, have a clear intent. Hell, I own copies of Antichrist, Gummo, and Freddy Got Fingered. I'm sure that says a lot about me, but the point I'm trying to make is that I can enjoy a bit of exploitative schlock from time to time, depending on how it is executed. Freddy Got Fingered is absurdist.
Ooh, you can't hurt me! You can't hurt me! Not with my cheese helmet!
Antichrist is surrealist.
Chaos reigns.
And Gummo is experimental, often feeling more like a slice-of-life documentary than a narrative feature. In my opinion, there's a clear intent and tone to each of these films that makes the taboo material easier to contend with, even in instances where they may do something that makes me upset or uncomfortable. The Idol's intent and tone could not possibly be less clear. The Idol is a story about a pop star named Jocelyn whose career is in jeopardy after suffering a mental breakdown following the death of her mother. She feels as if she's lost her creative voice and is doing anything she can to appease her label and keep her career afloat. She meets a sleazy club owner named Tedros, who she feels not only sexually, but artistically liberates her. However, Tedros' intentions turn out to be much more sinister, and he begins to take control of Jocelyn's life. On paper, this actually sounds like it has potential. You can sort of envision a version of this story that's emotional and thought-provoking. In practice though, what could have been, and arguably should have been, a simple and effective story is expanded into a seemingly endless 5-hour string of tonally inconsistent and illogical plot twists. I could spend almost the entirety of this video attempting to just explain the plot and character motivations in this series. In fact, in earlier drafts of the script, I did just that, so here's my explanation for those of you who care. But all that's really important to know is that both the plot of the show and the way it delivers information to you are both needlessly convoluted and obtuse. The show is a long and sometimes non-linear mishmash of disparate ideas, creating an experience that lacks a tonally consistent creative voice to guide you through it all. Instead, it practically begs for you to only engage with it on a scene-by-scene basis. This scene is supposed to be sexy. This scene is supposed to be funny. Here's a dramatic, intense scene. Here's a music video for a song The Weeknd recorded for the series where the lyrics are just literally describing his character. Here's a sad scene. Oh boy, another shocking twist reveal! It turns out that this person actually knows this person, who orchestrated the meeting of these two people, so this person could take control over this person, but it turns out that this person, it keeps the show entertaining, I guess, not really, but it just leaves you with a bunch of tiny puzzle pieces that don't actually form a big picture. It feels like a show that never had a central cohesive idea or creative voice behind it, that was being scrambled together from minute one, which perfectly coincides with Rolling Stone's reporting. I think the fact that trying to explain the relationship between the two main characters of the show requires Metal Gear Solid lore Pepe Sylvia levels of conspiratorial nonsense just about says it all. But that's not even the worst part. The worst part of all of this is that even if you attempt to decipher this Da Vinci Code of plot and presentation, none of the answers you find are satisfying and will inevitably only leave you more disappointed and confused. The gigantic twist of this entire story is that Jocelyn, the protagonist, was secretly the villain the whole time, and that most, if not all, of the things depicted in this show were her deliberately pulling the strings to paint herself as a victim so she could mind control everyone around her. Huh? What? Who is she supposed to be? Like, I know that there are rumors and speculation going around that this is based on Selena Gomez, but to me this sounds more like Emperor Palpatine.
I'm too weak. Oh, don't kill me, please.
I pledge myself to your teachings.
Good.
You're mine. Forever. Now go stand over there.
The Republic will be reorganized into the first galactic empire.
So this is how liberty dies. With thunderous applause.
I'm obviously being a little bit playful and silly, but I'm also not. This reveal makes Jocelyn so ludicrously, cartoonishly evil. You could genuinely call the show The Phantom Menace and it would make just as much sense. See, you thought Tedros was the scheming sleazeball, but it turns out that by the end, quote from Sam Levinson, Tedros has become the victim. The problem with this twist is that not only does it make no sense at all, but it is only a shocking revelation if you have the memory of a goldfish, or only engage with the show on the scene-by-scene basis it clearly wants you to. But if you're somehow managing to pay attention, this is an incredibly obvious reveal. The opening of the show displays Jocelyn being able to change her emotional state on command. Her best friend blatantly spells this out for the audience in a torture confession.
She f***ing controls everything around her and everyone, and now she's doing it to you.
I was bracing myself for this exact conclusion, even knowing full well it didn't make a lick of sense and would infuriate me, and it happened. Bravo. Yet again though, the purposefully convoluted approach to plot and delivery of said plot works to the creative team's advantage. It presents the opportunity for those creatively involved to act as though you're just not engaging with it properly. You just don't get what they're going for. Every choice was intentional. You're supposed to feel confused by the story and the tone. It just sort of put me in this entranced state where I felt like something was wrong with my brain, rather than something being really fundamentally wrong with this show. I'm not willing to watch the entire thing again to definitively say exactly what the final reveal means for every individual moment of the plot, but I think I do know what this gotcha reveal was supposed to mean for the audience thematically. See, we manipulated you into thinking that Jocelyn was the victim the whole time. See how easily you can be manipulated by those that you idolize? I think The Idol's biggest ace up its sleeve is social commentary. It's somewhat of an unspoken rule that posing your piece as satire or commentary on society softens the blow of controversial material. This is why South Park has had a successful, near 3-decade-long career. A lot of the provocative films we still seem to be debating to this day, like American Psycho, Taxi Driver, or Fight Club, function heavily off of their social commentary. Obviously, results can sometimes be mixed on how well this is achieved, especially since this approach creates a wide opportunity for misunderstanding and misinterpretation, and we've seen this very language be used and abused by many prank vloggers on this platform. I know we committed a crime, but it was satire though, so that means it's okay. But clearly there's a hard to define line between a tasteful piece of provocative commentary and a YouTube prank. To me, that line is defined by the artist's intent and how well that translates in the holistic execution of the art. The Wolf of Wall Street is a great example of this because it's not too dissimilar to The Idol in terms of content. It's filled to the brim with sex, drugs, and abuse, and gets away with a lot of it because of the commentary it's making about America. How it can reveal and accentuate the worst in someone who, on the surface, seems to just want to provide for themselves and their family. How we as Americans seem to have an obsession and fixation on glamorizing sex, drugs, and wealth, and how honest, genuine people are held down by this system, while the most corrupt and ruthless of us are virtually untouchable. It uses the language of filmmaking to convey these ideas, all the way from the opening, where a simple hard cut in the editing bay says as much as 1,000 words.
Integrity. Pride.
The Idol is littered with characters espousing wordy, crass commentary on the music industry.
Mental illness is sexy.
We all have to answer to somebody.
Who do you answer to?
God.
So you think that by losing his son, he was able to write something that saved a lot of people's lives? And because of that, you'll say yes to anything anyone asks you to do?
Yes.
Well, she's not a human being. She's a star. And stars belong to the world.
You know, I'm telling you, there's a gold mine in mental illness. Look at Jocelyn. All you have to do is admit it.
Your employees stage a walkout claiming Jocelyn's music's misogynistic and you weren't scared.
I mean, it had to be worth what, like 200 million in free advertising?
No, Phil the Boy jumped 8,000% just that day.
As well as admittedly beautiful shots that are vaguely symbolic and imply meaning where there probably isn't any. The thing is, there are moments of effective commentary to glean from The Idol, like how celebrities are often dehumanized and have very little autonomy in their own lives, or how their trauma is not only fetishized in their art, but used as a part of their public persona. The problem is that all of this only works in isolation, as it is all undermined by the provocative approach and especially by the gotcha ending. The execution of the show as a whole does not support the messaging it's trying to convey.
It's about an artist who feels stuck, who also feels pressured by the expectations of the world at large, and is trying to figure out who she is and what she wants to say.
A lot of the time, I think she doesn't know what she wants. That's kind of the scary thing.
That it's about a group of people seeking family, people alienated from the world, people with a lot of talent who don't necessarily know where to look in life. and they end up under the sway of someone like Tedros.
I think a lot of the audience will watch maybe the first few episodes and think that this guy is taking advantage of her. By the end, he realizes that she knows exactly what he's doing, and she knows exactly what she's doing.
This pimp from the Midwest who shows up in Beverly Hills ends up being the victim.
Still though, even posturing at the idea of saying something about the music industry and celebrity culture at large, again gives the creative team credence to, you guessed it, negate criticism. To arbitrarily defend any choice they make by claiming it was satire or commentary. As I always say, pointing something out is not the same thing as making a point about it. You actually have to have something to say at the end of it all, some sort of angle or take. You can't just reference people who have done that in the past and say that you're channeling them in this piece. That is not how this works. Yet it still remains effective at diffusing criticism because the social commentary present is very vague and therefore largely interpretable. It creates a Schrodinger's cat style paradox of thought, where anything in the idol can be seen as both profound or profoundly stupid, depending on who is observing it. If I point out that they cast Johnny Depp's daughter in a story about how celebrities weaponize abuse and victimhood to try and manipulate their audience, you could be thinking, wow, that's really distasteful, or, oh my god, bro, that's like so sick, dude, they thought of everything. I think that the reveal that Jocelyn was pulling the strings the whole time to manipulate her audience, aka you, is terrible and doesn't work because 1, I wasn't manipulated and saw it coming because the quote-unquote hints and Easter eggs were so transparent. 2, it completely destroys any of the effective commentary the rest of the piece sparingly had. And 3, I already know that a lot of celebrities are sociopathic and manipulative. Was this supposed to be a grand revelation?
Honey Boy is basically like a big woe is me story about how my father is. And the story that gets painted in Honey Boy is like this dude was like abusing his kid all the time. My dad never hit me. Never. But that wasn't my narrative because it didn't position me as like this wounded, fractured child that you could root for. Now I'm at Sundance and I'm like thinking that I'm the ultimate manipulative master.
But apparently, according to the creators of this show, this was an act of pure genius and everyone absolutely fell for it. To me, this show is the equivalent of when YouTube pranksters put the words satire, gone wrong, gone sexual in parentheses in the title to try and rid themselves of responsibility. But even then, you can just say that the vapid nature of the show is a commentary on how surface level the music industry is. You can shift the goalposts anywhere you want. The social commentary defense works wonders. But even if you think all of this is stupid and embarrassing and terrible like I do, the show still has one last line of defense near the bottom of its barrel. When all else fails, make it camp. When you are completely out of excuses for your cringy character or plotline, just say, he's a vampire, and the whole thing is a twisted fairy tale.
I think I initially wanted to make like a dark, twisted fairy tale with the music industry and everything I know about it, and heighten it. Tedros, you know, the first thing I can think about is Dracula, you know? He's just, he's Dracula.
Never mind that saying it's camp contradicts the serious commentary you're trying to make in your show, because it would take an absolute master of tone to effectively balance camp with the dark themes you're attempting to explore. Never mind how films that actually exude camp were either made by auteurs with minuscule resources or true visionaries who took the resources they did have and actually did something transgressive and groundbreaking, and not people with a huge mansion to film in and probably tens of millions of dollars worth of HBO and A24 backing, who aren't shifting the culture at all and are instead just following the television formula Ryan Murphy has been using for the last 14 years. Can't you see it's actually supposed to be bad and cringeworthy? It's camp, actually. Yeah, that's it. You would think that me calling The Idol the incestuous love child of Twilight and 50 Shades of Grey would mean that the show is a ton of fun. But it's not. The reason the "it's camp" defense irks me to no end, especially for this show, is because The Idol isn't even good camp. It's not blood-pumping, consistently hilarious, glamorous, flamboyant, energetic, grimy, or legitimately dangerous at all. American Horror Story is more effective camp than this, and coming from me, that should say a lot. The Idol is bland and boring, devoid of anything that would make it entertaining to watch. The pacing is a slog. There is absolutely no reason this needed to be 5 hours long. The moments of campiness that genuinely made me laugh hysterically or gave me ironic enjoyment because of the soap opera level character drama were so few and far between. Camp is supposed to be fun. Where is the fun in being angry, confused, disappointed, misled, and talked down to for 5 straight hour-long episodes? I would seriously have more respect for this show if it just skipped step 3 entirely. If the people involved just didn't even pretend like this show was making grand statements about real things and just owned up to it being sleazy, grindhouse schlock. Instead, it just exists in this limbo between grindhouse and art house, where not only does one approach directly contradict the other, but neither are done particularly well. The only point in doing both was so the people involved could cope super hard with the backlash they knew was coming. Backlash that they wanted so badly because they knew it would promote. I'm about to hit you with the most disappointing and anticlimactic ending since The Idol, and say that every single thing I've spent the entirety of this video talking about were all completely useless. For all of this show's built-in defenses against its critics, perhaps none is more effective than the fact that this show's one and only goal was this. What we are doing right now, talking about it. That's all it wants. It wants us all to cyclically talk about it with no end in sight. It wants to offend. It wants controversy, outrage, and discourse. It wants the memes and tweets.
A Rolling Stone report talk about a chaotic, toxic shooting. So what's your reaction to those accusations?
When my wife read me the article, I looked at her and I just said, I think we're about to have the biggest show of the summer.
Everything I've laid out in this video, confusing delivery of information, constantly posturing at deep meaning with surface-level hypocritical meta-commentary, and beautiful shots that are vaguely symbolic, theological plot twists, edgy, explicit, controversial scenes and dialogue, cringe-inducing scenes masked as camp, and a twist ending that comes completely out of left field and derails the show entirely. I tell you, as a quote-unquote content creator myself, intentional or not, this show is practically algorithmically designed and marketed to be engagement bait. It is impossible to criticize The Idol because you can't criticize something without talking about it, and that's all it wants you to do. This video validates every artistic decision they made, even though I detest them all. Saying all this feels like an admittance of defeat, that there is nothing we can possibly do because just continuing to say words and watch this video is contributing to the show's success. But there is a silver lining to all of this. That being, the 4-step critic-proof formula might not have worked. It genuinely seems like, for once, this whole get people talking method of promotion kind of backfired. HBO stopped reporting the total viewership numbers for this show after just 2 episodes, and quote, a decision on the 2nd season hasn't been determined, which does not bode well for the show's success. People are too busy talking about the show to actually get around to watching it, which is probably the most brilliant misfire this show ever could have made. Seems like it would have been more worthwhile to just make a good show that didn't rely so heavily on contrived defenses and cheap tactics to justify its existence and promote engagement, but here we are. But of course, we can't celebrate too hard because sadly, I don't really know if this show becoming a dud for HBO and everyone online hating on it are necessarily going to be enough to promote any actual change. Things may not have gone according to plan this time, but it doesn't mean they won't try it again. I'm not holding my breath for Euphoria Season 3 to be much better, let's just say that. I also somehow get the disturbing feeling in my gut that somehow in 20 years people are going to laud The Idol as subversive genius satire that was completely misunderstood in its time. The bad timeline. For now though, I guess we can all just have fun dunking on The Idol and, best case scenario, forget about it in a month and then agree to never, ever talk about it again.